Hi, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Turnpike Music Garage, a show that gets under the hood of live music. And when we're talking about live music, one of the things that bands want to know is, how do I get successful? But let's talk for a minute about what it means to be successful with a band, and then we can explore how to get there. And again, I brought back in some good friends of mine, Brian Karp, formerly of the band Letters to Cleo, who's a working studio musician, Manes from Mindz-I Entertainment, who actually gets bands to become famous, and Billy Spencer from Local Rock Gods, who you catalog them, right? You keep track of what they're doing?
Pretty much help promote and big booster, supporter of local music.
Awesome. So what we want to try to cover today is, what does success look like for a band? I guess original acts is what we're talking about, not covers, because covers are just come and go.
You could say cover bands too. I mean, if you're a working cover band, if you're playing 3 or 4 nights a week, and you're at the point where you're making more than just... once you start making $100 a person... Mm-hmm. And you're playing 3 or 4 nights a week, you could say goodbye to your 9 to 5 job. Job. And at that point, obviously if you become a function band, which means playing weddings or playing events or whatnot, that's what you could supplement that and actually increase that amount on a weekly basis and become more independent.
But you've run the gauntlet with Letters to Cleo, where you started, put together, and then and other bands too. Yeah. And you've gone through the process of writing music, original stuff, and dealing with what it takes to become
a lot of
national act.
I mean, the thing about being a band, it's not always about being the best player, but it's being the best player for that band. And people don't realize that, you could have a guy who's technically a great musician, but maybe not the right musician for that band. At the same time, you could have somebody who's maybe not the world's greatest, well-rounded musician, but he works really hard, or he or she works really, really hard to be the right person for that band. And it's a lot of it's talent, but also a lot of it's personality too, and being able to mix in. And it could be personality in the way that rubs too. Sometimes that little bit of rub, that little bit of
edge,
attention or edge, is what really drives a band to be better. A little like healthy competitiveness in the band. So there's a lot of factors that go into it. But the bottom line is being able to work at your craft, being able to produce something, being able to create a sound, being able to be, put something out there that's tangible.
Valid and people.
Yeah. And the other side of it too is, being in the right place and having the look or not. I mean, as superficial as those are all going to being, into what makes a band.
So that's like the chemistry from the starting point. Okay. Now, you're going to take that band, if you think they've got some talent, and then what are you up against when you're...
Well, I think the key is part of what you just said. They really need to have some talent.
Well, we're going to assume that to a certain
But that is really the truth.
Yeah.
There really needs to be, and I think a big part of what you said is absolutely true. There are two things that you can really control in this life, and it's attitude and effort. And you don't necessarily have to be the best player, but you have to have the attitude, you have to have the effort, you have to be willing to put in the time, you have to be willing to work. Is this your hobby, or is this your career path? What are you doing? Because that is really the difference for me when I take on a band to help get them to that next level. Are you doing this as a hobby? Do you want to play out on the weekends and be a big fish in a little pond? Or do you want to take this? Do you really want to go to that next level? Are you willing to make the sacrifices that you have to make to be a little fish in a big pond? And that's really difficult.
Well, let's take one of them. I'm sorry,
actually, I want to interject something here about bands as a whole. And my experience was, and I've talked to a lot of bands, is they don't know that there's a real business end to it, and they don't understand that we're collectively individuals, but we have to put a product forward, and we don't have goals.
Right.
Where does this band want to go? Do we want to go to this level, or do we want to be here? And I don't think bands put mission statements together or band goals.
They don't put goals together. Yeah. They have absolutely... That's part. They need direction. Yeah. They can produce an amazing product, and that's really what it is. Because now you're getting into marketing and advertising, and the first thing that you ask yourself in marketing and advertising, there's 3 questions, and the first one is, do I have a viable product?
Right.
Do I have a product that I think I'm going to be able to work with? Can I sell that product?
Right.
Can I effectively do my job in marketing and selling that product? But the third question is the most important. Are people going to buy it?
Exactly.
Are people going to buy that product? So have you, and again, your demographic comes into play.
That's the third thing is, where do I market this product?
Exactly. So the key is you have this industry is oversaturated, overpopulated, and over-entitled. Okay?
And the quality, too.
That's interesting. Well, let me ask you this question, though, because how many musicians do you know that have that mentality? Are they looking at it like as a business?
I deal with it every day.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
You know, wait, which part of it? Dealing with it as a business?
No, they're dealing with it as a business. Musicians starting out, they're putting a band together, have that savvy to sit and go, okay, do I have a product to sell? How, who am I to sell
About
to? Are they going to buy it?
1%
There you go.
of the bands that I work with, and those are the ones that I generally will sign, because they have to be serious about them. They have to understand that this is their business. It's not a game. It's not
being a rock star.
It's not being a rock star. Yeah. This is your business, and you have to look at it as a business. If you can't do that, then I can't help you. Because you have to be able to help yourself, and you have to be able to understand that if I say to you, you have to get up today at 6 o'clock in the morning because you have an interview, you're going to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, and you're going to get up bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and you're going to get yourself to that place, regardless if you have to wear a hat over your eyes or sunglasses or whatever it is, but it's a business. And I think that a lot of bands don't really take that end of it seriously. No. It's not just about getting out into a local bar. If you want to make this, then you have to make moves. You have to get out of your comfort zone. And you have to explore the different areas.
What a lot of people don't realize is when you're like going back to your big fish in a small town. When you're the big fish in a small town, you're in your comfort zone. You go out and you maybe play once or twice a month, and then afterwards, because it's such the big event in town, you have the big party at your house or at somebody else's house, and you're partying all night long. And then you're like, we came, we saw, we conquered. The thing is, when you're a touring band and you're really trying to make it, it's like, nah, that's not going to happen. You might hang out, but the next night you might have to be in a town that's 400 miles away the next night. So you might hang out till 2 or 3 in the morning, but you're not going back to the hotel room and partying. You're getting into the van or the bus or whatnot, and somebody's driving the whole next day, and then you're hoping
5 hours,
and you got to try to keep that energy up, because at that point you're playing 4 to 5 gigs a week minimum. Not including in stores and whatnot.
Well, that's an interesting other point, though, from the standpoint of making it happen. Do they realize that it's that kind of work involved?
No.
Do they realize that you have to get out there every single show? I mean, Joe DiMaggio once said he was running out, I guess, a base hit to first base, and flat out. The Yankees were in the series. They had 5 games left. There was no, and they're like, why are you working so hard, killing so hard?
Somebody never saw me play before.
That's exactly it. Somebody's seeing me for the first time, and you've got to keep that energy up for every single show that you do, regardless of how much sleep you got.
That kind of falls under the consistency. A lot of bands don't have consistency, whether in playing or performance or promoting. They do it one day, but not the next day. They do it. They're very inconsistent.
Once again, some bands don't understand that. The only time they play is when they a lot of bands that. They might have some really great songs, and they might have some great ability and talent, but they don't understand, and going back to your sports analogy, it's the day in, day out repetition of doing something. Like, it's not only about getting together and practicing once or twice a week and then doing a gig. It's like, what do you do on your own? Are you practicing on your own? Are you making yourself the best person that you can be for that band? And it's not about, like I said, it's not about saying I have to learn all styles of music and play everything. I mean, if you can, great. But it's like putting the time in on your own to make sure that your stuff is together. So when you get there with the band, you're ready to rock whenever. If somebody calls, because sometimes, especially in original music, you get calls sometimes like, hey, we have a band that canceled, and can you fill in? Or so-and-so's coming to town this weekend, and they want us to get a local opener. Can you do it? And if you go like, oh, man, we haven't rehearsed in 2 weeks. We just had our big gig in town 2 weeks ago. You're not going to feel really confident about it. But if you trust yourself, if you've done your diligence and done your work, you can show up and just rock the house. Pretty much. I like to call it. It's like I used to say. Like, one of the things I do is I like to prepare myself to have the highest level of mediocrity available. So that way, if I'm having an off night, an off night for me, if I say, I played pretty mediocre, nobody else is going to hopefully know.
Right.
But it's like I try to achieve the highest level of mediocrity that I can achieve. So.
Well, so let's say now I'm going to go back to you, Maria. You have a band that's committed like that. Okay, it's got the goods, so to speak, and has a realization of the kind of work that's involved with actually putting the shows on and the grueling requirements of a tour, demands of a tour, what else are they faced with? What other obstacles are they faced with? What else do they have to do? I mean,
a lot of it from once you get to that point, once you get to that standpoint, you're gonna at that point you're gonna have A&R guys out to see you. You're making enough noise.
An A&R guy is
they're
artists and repertoire.
I know.
Your friendly neighborhood. We're gonna sign you maybe. Guys.
Yeah, okay.
That's what I like to call them.
They're the guys who take you out to the free dinner.
Right.
But they're not the guys who have to finally okay you. They're the guys who have to bring you to the guy who's going to finally
okay you. So at that point, now you have to understand that everything that you do, every move that you make, every gig that you perform, you already know, like they're already dedicated. But now you have to understand that exactly at this point, every move you make counts. You represent your band, you represent your management company. Everything that you do at this stage of the game matters. Yep. In this business, again, it is oversaturated. It is overpopulated. It is overentitled. So the days of your Axl Rose tantrums are over.
Well,
you have them.
You still have them. I mean,
but you have to have attained Axl status to get away with them.
It depends. I mean, there's some people recently who've gotten big for literally they're more known for their on-stage meltdowns.
Yeah, right.
And people go see them for that. It's like
that's
it's
like
like
Knievel syndrome.
Or
Indianapolis,
500 people go see the car crash.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if you're talking about making it on the pure concept of music, that's making it on shock value.
Yeah.
There's a difference.
Actually, I want to go back to one thing. When you were talking about the realization of touring on the East Coast, especially the Northeast, is very different than touring in the rest of the country, too. If you look at the Northeast, all the cities are very close together. Nothing is more than a 4-hour drive. So it's very easy to do from, let's say, from Boston down to D.C., and maybe a little bit further west, like, let's say, as far west as, like, Pittsburgh or even Cleveland. Yeah, and be a comfortable touring band. But then when you go out to the West Coast, for instance, I play with a band out of Portland, Oregon, and when we go touring, we're driving minimum 6 or 7 hours to our first gig.
Yeah.
Outside of Portland.
That's the closest city. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean for instance, I just did a weekend where we did a gig, and the first gig was I flew into Portland, and then we were leaving the next day going to Boise, Idaho. That's a drive.
That's a road trip.
It is. It's a haul.
Yeah.
I want to come back into this, what you're faced with as a band doing this. How much of the cookie cutter, the manufactured bands, I mean, it's oversaturated as it is.
Now you're gonna get me hot under the collar.
Well, that could work.
Once again, but that goes to the digital domain. It's what's available to people.
Right.
If you're in a rural area and you only know what everybody else knows, and you're getting your same source of information from everybody else, it's up to the individual to try to be like, do I want to create something different, or am I going to look for something different?
Or am I going to conform?
Yeah.
Well,
and that's really...
we're trying to make this for the audience that's like thinking about or in the process of writing material and want to go and try to make it big. And they've developed these elements to understanding some of the things that we're saying, and now that's another...
You have two paths that you could take. You can take the path of conformity, and you can decide that you're going to do cookie cutter...
Disney,
crap
whatever.
That's on the radio. I'm sorry, did I say that out loud?
No,
I'm sorry.
They won't get plead. They won't get plead.
But or you can decide to really decide that, okay, you know what, I might not have that sound, but I have a niche and I have a demographic, and I'm gonna play to that demographic. I'm gonna develop it, and that's a big part of one of the things that we're doing. It's called Turn the Radio Off, Turn the Underground Up.
Yeah.
And that's a big tour that we're putting together, and it's basically, I don't really want you to turn the radio off, but I want the radio to get back to what it used to be. I want to hear good music on the radio.
I mean, one of the problems you could say is when you had the homogenization of basically rock radio.
Right.
You don't have the independent radio stations anymore. No. It's what's available. Yeah. Well,
listen, I hope you guys had fun talking with us. I'm going to wrap this up a little bit now. And I hope you in the audience got some knowledge out of this. Check back with us again for our next episode. I'd like to thank Brian Karp and Maria Manes and Billy Spencer for being with us today. And we'll see you next time on Turnpike Music Garage. Thanks.